I was happy to be on the Dre Mack show last night with Danny Atherton, and there was something about the show that made me say to myself, let me do a video on the 6 things that were suppressed by the media in the Jonathan Majors case. I'm sure there are others, and I would love for people to throw some of the others into the comments. Something that the media does that is one of the least talked about problems in the media. But for these types of cases, it's a really noticeable problem. And that is the issue of what the media suppresses when they do a story. So a lot of times when you read a story, it could be inverted pyramid, it could be who, what, when, where, why, it could be facts only, and then it leaves out certain facts or suppresses certain facts that would change the dynamics and change the general attitude of what most people would think about the story in general. That happened with the Majors case over and over and over again. I am going to do 6 examples of that. The first example is the issue of who called the police. I have to tell you, it wasn't until I was sitting in Manhattan criminal court that I realized Jonathan Majors called the police. Grace Jabbari did not call the police. He did. And of course, that begs the question, why would somebody who beat their girlfriend up say to themselves, you know what? I think I'll call the NYPD Blue, and particularly a black male in New York. That makes absolutely no sense. And of course, his hesitation to do so, which by the way, there didn't seem to be any hesitation to do so. Any fear he may have was of course realized because they arrive at the scene and they make him the bad guy and place him under arrest in his own home, which he had been locked out of by Miss Jabbari. Second example, and these examples are in no particular order, is the issue of de-escalation. There's so much talk when we talk about domestic violence about who escalates, who doesn't escalate, who's the instigator, who's the person chasing whom, who's pursuing whom. We see John Majors de-escalate over and over and over again. From putting her back in the truck, to running away from her, to going to get in a hotel room on the Upper East Side on 77th Street. Couldn't be more further away than where he was. This is all de-escalation. It's all de-escalation. So what are we telling men? We certainly want men not to be aggressive with women. Everybody cares about sexual violence and domestic violence. There's nobody that doesn't care about these issues. And Jonathan Majors does the textbook thing that one would think we would want a man to do who's in some sort of a conflict with the person that he's going out with. He does all of those things. He gets locked out of his own place by this person who has texted him 30-something times only a short time before. The police show up and make him the villain. Now, if that doesn't matter to the jury and the judge and to Alvin Bragg's office, then that tells me that evidence doesn't matter and facts don't matter. And that's extremely scary. Typically, the person pursuing, the person stalking, the person trying to get into the space of person number 2 is the aggressor of these stories. 9 times out of 10. And frankly, quite often, that's the man in the story. In this case, it wasn't the man. Incredibly enough, it was in fact Grace Jabbari. She's chasing Jonathan Majors down the streets of Chinatown, and there's video of that. So it's not even like, oh, this was witness testimony or testimony from the 2 principals in the case. No, we've got plenty of video of who was de-escalating and who wasn't de-escalating.
It's important to know what the driver of the private car said about them fighting, because it gives a little bit of context. The driver's name is Naveed Sarwar, and he said this in court: "I was feeling something was going on in the back seat. When I reached the canal and Center Street, Majors wanted to get rid of Jabbari, and he opened the door. I saw they were fighting when the car stopped. He was trying to get rid of her. Jabbari was yelling at Majors and they were having an argument. I had a feeling Jabbari had hit Majors earlier, the way she was fighting and the sounds produced."
If I pick you up and place you in a vehicle and then turn around and run away, that's a de-escalation. I'm de-escalating and I'm trying to get away from you. You see them jostling in the street. You see him de-escalating. And then you see the media pretty much ignore that factor in this case. Now, can you imagine? It can't be said enough. Can you imagine what would be said if it was the other way around? And John Majors was chasing Grace Jabbari down the streets of Chinatown. I'm pretty sure that he would rightfully be considered the aggressor. A third issue is the arrest of Grace Jabbari. You want to talk about something that was suppressed in the media. I think it was the Messenger that originally broke the story that Grace Jabbari had been arrested for assault and that the person she had assaulted was John Majors. You'll notice that they reported, but there's an addendum at the end of a lot of their headlines, which is, but this arrest and this assault will not be prosecuted by Alvin Bragg's office. So you can pretty much tell what happened there. The media finds out that she was arrested. They call Alvin Bragg's office, and Alvin Bragg's office immediately tells the media, but we're not prosecuting this. So no big thing, nothing to see here, just an arrest. Well, nothing to see here until you see photos of scratch marks on the arm and face of John Majors. The other thing that kind of the media is really trying to really not talk about is that Alvin Bragg is a progressive prosecutor. Remember that Alvin Bragg's entire reason to come into office was that he was going to be that type of prosecutor that wasn't going to do the prosecutions on small things, and he was going to be progressive, and he's a progressive prosecutor.
As DA, from day one, I work to make the office the progressive leader it should be. That means more aggressive steps to reverse mass incarceration, especially in communities of color.
That's how he ran, and that's how he was elected to office. He was seen as somebody who was going to be sort of another progressive prosecutor in the United States. Certainly, he's been criticized as such by Donald Trump, that's for sure. And yet, this case would fly in the face of that. What typically progressive prosecutors argue is that they're not going to over-arrest, they're not going to overcharge, we're not going to fill the prisons, we're not going to have Rikers Island busy. Well, then what explains the prosecution of Jonathan Majors? Not just the prosecution of Jonathan Majors, Kevin Porter, Adam Foss, that would appear to be over-prosecution as well. So what was all that progressive prosecutor stuff?
In a pair of separate statements emailed to News One this weekend, Chaudhry also questioned the ethics of Bragg's office and cited an eagerness to bring hasty criminal charges, particularly when a black man is accused of a violent crime by a white woman, because it was clear to everyone that this case should never have been brought due to the overwhelming evidence of Mr. Foss's innocence.
Along the lines of the issue of the injuries to John Majors being suppressed is the testimony of a police detective in court. I try not to say his name a whole lot because it's somebody who's related to a lot of law enforcement people. I know how law enforcement is. They don't like to have their name out there in the public a lot. For people who are following the case, they know his name. But bottom line is, he's a police detective of many years in the city of New York. He processed the arrest of Grace Jabbari. He testifies at trial at Manhattan Criminal Court, and about 90% of his testimony is blocked. And of course, the media doesn't really tell you that. I mean, they reported, okay, wow, there was a police detective on the stand today. The part they left out, for the most part in the press, was he really didn't get to say much, and he sure as hell didn't get to talk about the particulars of his involvement in the case, which of course involved the arrest of Grace Jabbari and the injuries to Jonathan Majors at the hands of Grace Jabbari. So why was that deleted? There was even a really interesting moment on the stand where this detective had his case file. So he's got the case file open, and it's fairly large actually. And the pictures of Jonathan Majors' injuries from this alleged assault from Ms. Jabbari that was being processed and she was arrested for are shown in that case file. The judge can see over the shoulder of the witness, in this case this detective, and he tells them to cover up the photos because he didn't want the jury, the Judge Gaffey, Michael Gaffey, did not want the jury to see the photos.
And then I watched firsthand a police detective from the New York City Police Department have all of his testimony, virtually 80% of his testimony blocked. And the judge actually say to him, don't show those pictures to anybody. Can you cover that up? When the pictures of, it's hard to confirm this, but I'm pretty sure those were the pictures of, of Jonathan Majors.
Because I could see them from where I was sitting. I could see them. And then they made him turn it flat face down so that the jury couldn't see him. But I could see the picture from where I was sitting. It was his face and where he was scratched, like right here on his arm.
This is a fact, or at least an alleged fact. We never get to really deal with it, or they never really got to deal with it in a court of law. That would have been interesting to pursue. What exactly happened there? How did he get the scratches? What's going on here? But that detective wasn't really allowed to talk. Seth Zuckerman, one of John Majors' attorney, wasn't really allowed to proceed with his line of questioning with a witness and a person on the stand that to me is one of the most important people on the stand. If you think the other cops who are involved in this thing are important, I'm not sure why a police detective isn't important. Again, the pictures get suppressed. The issue of Mr. Majors being assaulted gets suppressed. And so more facts in this case that to me round out the entire story get suppressed. And the media sort of goes along with that. So a lot of times it's not so much what the media reports, it's what they leave out. And what they leave out often, I think, would leave most people. And most people, let's face it, we live in a 144 character world. We live in a Twitter world, a TikTok world. Most people are reading the headlines. They're not reading the entire story. So what's in the back of the story, what's left out of the story, what's omitted can be a very, very big thing. And unless you're doing some sort of deep dive, which most people don't have time for, understandably, people have to live their lives. You would not know any of these facts. I just wanted to put that out there, a few facts. Good luck, everybody.